Hey there, welcome back to the show. This is Phil. I'm here with Skye Jitani.
Hello, Phil.
Hi. Christian Taylor is
Elsewhere?
On the moon. I don't know where she is. Probably doing her movie thing. Maybe she's doing her movie thing with all her extras in Rockford, maybe. Maybe that's today.
It could be.
She's doing a movie thing. So
she's wrangling extras.
She's an extra wrangler. Mm-hmm. I'm the extra wrangler. If you don't have enough wranglers.
If you have too many, you have an extra wrangler.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's funny. Hey, it's a podcast. What do you know? Hey, it's a podcast. And we got video. Hey, it's a podcast. And lend an ear. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. Oh, we'll talk to Skye.
Hi, Phil.
Hi. But Christian's gone. She's wrangling extras for nothing but a song. They're not paying her very much at all. Hey, it's a podcast. So lend an ear. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. How much would you have to be paid to try to come up with 200 extras for a movie in Rockford on very short notice and then manage them all and come up with all of their costumes?
Probably a fair amount.
Yeah.
Because I don't have any of those skills.
Yeah. And I wouldn't enjoy any part of that.
No, me either.
Process.
Mm-mm. But maybe it's good bio CV filler for her. You know?
It might be if she longs to wrangle more extras in the future. Have you ever been an extra?
Not on purpose.
Okay. Would you ever sign anything or walk by a sign at Midway Airport that said filming of a reality TV show is in progress? You acknowledge you may be used on camera by passing this sign?
No, I
which
did.
To me, violated my constitutional rights because I couldn't take my flight without passing that sign, so I didn't really have a choice,
what
did I?
What movie was it? Or
it was a TV show. There was a reality show about Southwest Airlines.
Oh, that's right.
For a while.
Yeah. I did sign up online once to get to be an extra in a movie that was being shot out here.
Yeah.
Remember the Superman movie, Man of Steel?
Yeah.
It was shot out in Aurora.
Oh, yeah, the parts in the country,
right,
the fields.
Right.
Okay.
I just thought I'm a Superman fan.
Yeah.
I ended up not particularly liking that movie, but I thought if I get caught, I don't think they need a lot of.
Signed up?
I don't think that's supposed to be rural Kansas, and I don't think I fit the look.
Did you send them a headshot?
No, they just, I don't know what they looked for. Maybe I did. I don't remember.
Oh, okay.
But I didn't get called in. I could have been like a Lex Luthor / terrorist stand-in. But
yeah. When I was a kid, when I was in high school, they filmed Lucas.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember Lucas.
At my high school, at Glenbard West. And they needed to do a football game, fill the stands. So
Charlie Sheen was in that.
Was he?
Yeah.
I don't remember. So it was like $10 and lunch if you will come out and sit in the stands.
As a high school student, that's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, I didn't.
Especially in the 80s.
I didn't do it.
You didn't do it?
No.
Why?
Because it's too many people.
Didn't you go to school every day?
Yeah, and then I got out of there.
Weren't there lots of people?
I got out of there as soon as I could.
To play with puppets and things.
Yeah, to do important work.
You're so strange.
To do important work for the kingdom. Mm-hmm. And being an extra in Lucas.
That was a good movie.
It was not important work for the kingdom.
I like that movie.
Okay. How was your Thanksgiving?
It was very chill.
That's good.
It was chill.
You took the kids downtown?
We took the kids downtown for an overnight. We did some, shopping in the city.
Yeah.
Thanksgiving. My son and I watched season 2 of Stranger Things. I had already seen it, but he watched actually season 1 and 2 over break. So kind of.
How did he like it?
He loved it.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
It's great. I love that show.
It's well written.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Minneapolis, and it was my granddaughter's first birthday.
Oh, that's right.
We had a little birthday party. It's the birthday party they'll never remember, except for the pictures you take of them attempting to eat their first cake and have their first sugar buzz.
Really? This is her first sugar buzz?
I think so, yeah. My daughter's pretty strict.
Oh.
Yeah, she doesn't get much sugar. So this was big.
Was it everything you hoped it would be?
I don't know that my expectations were that high.
That's good.
There's a really cool toy, though. It's supposedly one of the hit toys of the season. My mother-in-law got it for. It's an elephant that sings. Do your ears hang low? It's a stuffed element. It's the elementary elephant that sings, do your ears hang low? And while it's singing, its ears flop down and cover its eyes and then flop back up. They're like animatronic ears.
And did Marley like this?
She loved it.
So it's a winner.
Yeah, she started dancing to the song, and then she'd just hold it up when it ended so you could push the paw again and make it go again, and then she'd dance to the song. She was all over it.
They should do a Republican version of that elephant.
Is it a donkey?
No, a Republican.
Does your ass hang low?
Oh, my goodness. I was going to say, do your hands hang low and grope women?
Oh, that's even worse.
I know. They could do
even worse.
They could do a Democrat version also.
I was thinking if it was the elephant and you said they should do a Republican version, that would be the Republican version unless it was the Democrats making fun of the elephant, and then you'd have to flip it and have the Republicans making fun of the donkey. And what would they make fun of the donkey for hanging low?
That all went through your mind in those few seconds. That's impressive.
That's the best I could come up with, and you made me say ass on the podcast.
I didn't make you say anything.
Now we'll have to bleep it or something.
Oh, my goodness.
This is terrible. I meant donkey.
Take responsibility, Phil. Own it.
Donkey.
Okay.
Speaking of
Phil?
This is my favorite story that I've seen in a long time.
I have not looked at the headline.
This is my favorite story.
Let's see.
Have you ever wondered how turtles hibernate?
I don't think I've ever wondered that.
I
didn't even know they did hibernate.
At my grandpa's lake, where do they go? Did you think they fly south? Where do they go?
I don't know.
Yeah.
They hibernate?
They hibernate at the bottom of ponds. Turtles go down in the mud at the bottom of a pond and they can stay there with the water frozen over their heads for up to 100 days. And turtles have lungs and breathe air. How is that possible?
It's a miracle.
It's a miracle of God.
Do they have like little scuba devices?
Proof of a miracle of God. No, they take goldfish and they strap them to either side of their face and breathe through their gills. No, that's not what they do.
All right.
The secret to turtle hibernation, butt breathing.
Excuse me?
Butt breathing.
This podcast is not going well. Butt breathing.
What would happen if you were submerged in a pond where the water temperature hovered just above freezing and the surface was capped by a lid of ice for 100 days? What would happen to you, Skye?
I'm pretty sure I would die long before 100 days.
Underwater, no access to air.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, you'll die.
I'm not a turtle.
And that's because you're not as cool as a turtle. And by cool, I don't just mean amazing. I mean literally cool as in cold. Plus, you can't breathe through your butt. Okay? This is awesome.
I just have a bad picture of a snorkel where it shouldn't be.
As an ectotherm, an animal that relies on an external source of heat, a turtle's body temperature tracks to its environment. If the pond water is 1 degree Celsius, so is the turtle's body. But turtles have lungs and they breathe air, so how is it possible for them to survive in a pond with a lid of ice where they can't come up for air? The answer lies in the relationship between body temperature and metabolism. A cold turtle in cold water has a very slow metabolism, lower energy and oxygen demand. So they use up stored energy and they uptake oxygen from the pond water by moving it across body surfaces that are flush with blood vessels.
I have 2 questions.
Yeah.
Where did you get this story?
In this way, they can get enough oxygen to support their minimal needs without using their lungs. Turtles have one area that is especially well vascularized. Their butts.
My second question is in what way does this serve our audience?
Oh, thanks, Christian.
I'm just saying.
I figured I could get away with this story because Christian wasn't here.
But
I put this under the category of general interest.
That turtles have highly vascular butts.
Yes.
That
turtles,
when water moves across, they can extract oxygen from.
Yes, they suck oxygen out of the water with their butts. Isn't that fantastic?
It is remarkable. If you are a reptiliologist, what's a reptile scientist called?
Reptiliologist? No, it's a herpetologist. That's a snake lover. I don't know. Now, the ice-covered pond presents 2 problems for turtles. They can't surface to take a breath, and little new oxygen gets into the water. Mm-hmm. So on top of that, there are other critters in the pond consuming the oxygen that was produced during the summer. So over the winter, as the oxygen is used up, the pond becomes hypoxic. Mm-hmm. Low oxygen, that's what that means. Or anoxic.
No oxygen.
No oxygen. Yeah. Some turtles can handle water with low oxygen content. Some cannot. Which turtles do you think are good at handling water with low oxygen content, Skye?
The ones with bigger butts?
Snapping turtles and painted turtles are very good at handling low oxygen situations. And they actually extract calcium from their shells to offset anoxia. Is that freakish?
That's amazing, Phil.
This is what God and or evolution did, cooked up for turtles, and it's astonishing.
Yeah, okay.
They suck oxygen through the skin of their butts, and they pull calcium out of their shells to prevent low oxygen disorders.
Do all turtle species live like super long lives?
I think
sea
so,
turtles like 100 years, a couple hundred. Is that true of like snapping turtles and little turtles?
Little turtles don't live like 100 years, but they live a while. Yeah. Because I've always wondered about that, because we always catch turtles at my grandpa's lake. And then, when I learned, like, oh, they actually stay in the water all winter under the ice? How the heck does that work?
Mm-hmm.
Now I know.
Now you know. Did you wonder that and actively search for the answer and found this article? Or how did you come across this?
It came across my news feed, because I just automatically, if there's stories about religion, turtle butts, those are pretty much the big red flags that my news feed always grabs. Religion and turtle butts.
I'm amazed.
All right, you want a story? But come on, admit it. Friends at home, friends and family at home, that's interesting. Is that not interesting?
Turtles can breathe out of their butts, but you can talk out of yours. There's the connection.
They can't breathe out of their butts.
Through their butts.
They breathe into their butts, and not technically into their butt, into the skin of their backside. Yeah. That's how it works.
Okay.
That's how turtles survive.
I can't wait to get the audience feedback on this episode.
Do you know why turtles are very vulnerable when they come out of hibernation?
Because they're tired and weak like every other animal when they're out.
Yes, but also because they're basically one big cramped muscle. Because there's so little oxygen in their blood that their muscles cramp up. And it takes a while for them to get moving again.
Well, that's how I feel when I wake up in the morning.
Yeah.
I'm cramped.
You need to do more butt breathing. It seems like a yoga thing.
My wife complains I do a little too much butt breathing when I'm sleeping at night.
Okay, next story. See, it was great when I was telling it, but then you took it in a bad direction. I've had this one for a while, and we keep not getting to it, but I think it's interesting. Teens are becoming adults later than they used to. Did you read this?
I think they all pretty much become a teen at 13, don't they?
It's when they become an adult, not when do kids become teens. It's when do teens become adults.
Delayed adulthout. This is like a thing. Yeah. It's been known for a while.
It is a thing.
Yeah.
This is
failure
a thing
to launch
like
and all that.
Butt breathing in turtles, as surely as that is a true thing. This is not fake news. So is this teens. Teens are growing up more slowly than they did 2 decades ago, and today's 18-year-olds act like the 15-year-olds of the 1990s. Okay, now this is...
I see that.
This is scientific. This is not someone saying, I think today's 18-year-olds are like yesterday's 15-year-olds. It is actually true.
This is good news for Roy Moore.
Oh, dear. Moving on.
Sorry.
Now, there's a good side to this. The good side is, they're engaging in adult activities. In particular, they measured these 4 activities: drinking, driving, dating, and working for pay.
Okay, wait. Did you say that again?
Drinking.
Alcohol, I assume.
Anything. They don't drink anything. Yes, alcohol.
Okay.
Drive. What else would
I don't know. You're talking about breathing out of weird places. What am I supposed to...
Drinking alcohol.
Yeah.
Driving cars.
Uh-huh.
Dating people. And working for pay money.
Thank you, Phil.
I'm trying to make
for
this
the
clear,
slow among us,
since you're still on a little bit of a tryptophan hangover. They're doing all of these things later than they used to, delaying the transition from adolescence into adulthood.
Yeah.
The good news is rates of car accidents and teen pregnancies are falling dramatically.
Well, didn't we talk about this a few weeks ago? I don't know if we did, but I read a piece that found it was based on that twangy story in the Atlantic about smartphones destroying a generation.
Twangy?
Her last name is Twangy.
Oh,
I think.
Okay.
Anyway,
I thought she wrote with a southern accent.
No, this article about how smartphones are destroying a generation and finding that like the rate of high school seniors who are dating is like the lowest it's ever been. the flip side of that is teen pregnancies and sexually active teenagers is also much lower than it used to be because those things tend to go together, dating and sexual activity.
Yeah.
So you can look at that as a win or a failure.
So here's the actual survey.
Okay.
Statistics. Here's the statistics. I don't have really firm statistics on the butt-breathing turtles, but I do on this, on the adult children.
All right.
Non-adult children.
Let's hear it.
The non-adult adults. Because they're 18.
Right.
So they're, okay. And this is comparing 12th graders in 1994.
I was a 12th grader in 1994.
What?
Yeah.
So this is comparing you.
That was my graduation year.
To 12th graders in 2014.
Okay.
Okay. Can you picture one of those?
Yes.
Someone who's 20 years younger than you are.
Yeah.
Okay. In 1994, 81% of 12th graders had tried alcohol. 20 years later, dropped to 66% who had tried alcohol. In 1994, 85% of 12th graders had driver's licenses. That's dropped to 73%. In 1994, 83% of 12th graders had gone on dates. 20 years later, only 58% of 12th graders have gone on a date.
That's crazy.
I know. And 72% of 12th graders in 1994 had worked for pay. That is down to 56%.
Wow. So assuming this is accurate, what is the explanation or the hypothesis behind
the prevalence of risky behaviors has also declined. Rates of binge drinking, teen pregnancy, and teen crime are lower than ever before. But the transition into adulthood has slowed down so much that these researchers say people age 18 to 29 are living through a new life stage between adolescence and adulthood, emerging adulthood.
That's stupid.
The consequence of this is that teens are less prepared for college and the workplace. Technology is a big part of it. They're becoming more isolated, and they actually reference the story, yes, smartphones are destroying a generation.
Yeah, that's the story.
High school students who use social media a lot, this is a contrary position. High school students who use social media a lot aren't any more depressed than those who use it a little. But technology is quickly widening generational gaps. The pace of change is so rapid now that we raise our children in a world completely different from the one we grew up in. That is true. As technology advances, these trends could accelerate. Soon, 18-year-olds could look like the 13-year-olds of the past.
That's reassuring.
Is that more acne or less acne? Pre-acne. They'll lose their acne.
I don't think it has an actual biological impact.
13-year-olds don't have any acne.
So, one of the best books I ever read to help me understand these trends.
Yeah.
It's probably a 20-year-old book now. Maybe it's from the 90s. It's called Consumed, written by a guy named Benjamin Barber. He's an economist.
Okay.
And the premise of the book is very simple. And it is that in a consumer economy, in order to have that economy continue to grow, you need people to buy more and more stuff. And the way to do that is by getting children to act like adults and to get adults to act like children.
Oh.
In other words, in a household, you want the spending decisions to be made by the children.
Yeah.
And as adults get older, you want them to be more driven by their appetites and desires and impulses and have them behave more like children.
You want them to want the cookies.
Exactly. And the side effect of that is prolonged adolescence. So when they talk about emerging adulthood, in economic terms, that is like a huge win because it means you have people who have very little responsibility for others. They're not married, they don't have children, they don't have others to care for, and they can be completely focused on just fulfilling their own needs and desires through the consumption of goods and experiences. That's what an unrestrained consumer economy creates.
Doesn't it make it a little hard to find employees?
Yes, that's the flip side. Is you're not biologically reproducing people, you're not creating babies, as Japan is discovering. It hurts the economy because you can't get more workers. And then when you get completely self-absorbed young adults who can't sacrifice for the greater good or who won't serve in a larger organization because they're too narcissistic, you can't sustain it. So it's a self-defeating thing where it's temporarily great economically because you got a bunch of people spending money on themselves, but you're not actually investing in a sustainable economic structure. So that's where we're at. Isn't that wonderful news?
So where are we in 20 years?
That's pretty frightening.
Where does it go from here? We're already having to, like, when states crack down on illegal immigrants and say, no, Americans should do those jobs.
Yeah.
Most of the jobs that the illegal immigrants are doing, they can't get Americans to do. No 20-year-old wants to go pick beans
I talked to the CEO of an investment firm in New York, pretty large financial institution. This is probably 3 years ago, and he did this presentation about the economic kind of stagnation in Japan and the economic stagnation in much of Western Europe, and then looked at the American economy and why it's still doing pretty well. And he said it's because of one thing: immigration.
Yeah.
Because we're not having babies at a rate to replace older generations, but because of the U.S. immigration policy, it's broken and needs to be reformed. But immigrants are the ones who are keeping this economy fueled because they're just workers who contribute to the economy. And if we totally shut down immigration, we'd be in the same place that Japan and Western Europe are.
Yeah. I hear you. Okay, so let's take that, some of the stuff we're talking about, and let's transfer it to the church. Okay, because Skye Jitani, who's sitting next to me, I don't know if you knew this, friends and family.
I'm so honored that we're talking about this on the same episode as the turtles.
Yeah, the butt-breathing turtles of Madagascar. Isn't that a DreamWorks movie? Skye has a new book out. It's called Immeasurable: Reflections on the Soul of Ministry in the Age of Church Incorporated. I'm holding it up. If you got the video, I'm holding it up. See? It's a nice cover.
It's an optical illusion.
Did you design that?
I did, actually.
Oh, that's awesome.
For the most part. I mean, there's a designer who did but I kind of said, let's do one of these things.
Okay, I hear you. Why? What's the book for? It's a collection of essays, right?
Yes, it is. Some are short, some are long.
Did you consider calling it The Ruminations of a Madman? Or something more provocative?
That could be its second print title.
Why is it called
Second edition.
Immeasurable?
Because it's challenging the idea that everything that's valuable can be measured. And I call it industrial discipleship era that we are in, where churches just become a factory where we think if you put raw people in on one end and give them the right inputs and sermons and programs. They'll churn out disciples on the other end. Right. So it's critiquing that vision of ministry. It's what we learned
from the Industrial Revolution, Skye.
Well, we've applied it to pretty much everything. And my point is that actually the most valuable things can't be measured. And there are mysteries behind ministry that we need. Those of us who particularly who are called to leadership in the church need to wrestle with the fact that we are engaged in an incredibly mysterious calling, and a lot of it is beyond our ability to control or measure.
Do you know what Einstein said?
What did Einstein say?
Einstein said, not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts.
Amen.
Yeah. So I think Einstein's with you. I think he would probably endorse your book.
Clearly. Let's put that on the cover. No, early on, I talk about, I think it's in the introduction, like most of the core central doctrines of Christianity are actually paradoxes. They're mysteries, right? Like the Trinity or the Incarnation.
Those are the parts that give us trouble. Those are the parts that concern us. So we need to downplay those parts.
Downplay the Trinity.
Yeah, so it seems more manageable.
Well, okay, then take the Incarnation, right? Orthodox Christianity affirms that Jesus is holy God and holy man. How those things work together, it's a paradox, it's a mystery. The Trinity, God, 3 in 1 is a mystery. And then what happened on the cross? Lots of fellowships have been broken or bonded over disagreements on exactly what happened on the cross and what mysteriously functioned in the salvation that Jesus accomplished there. So you take God, Jesus, and salvation, and humanity, even like how does our free will work with God's sovereignty? That's still debated all over the place. Like all these things are great mysteries. And at the intersection of all of those is ministry. Yet the popular view of ministry that at least I've been formed into says it's really just a skill. It's based on best practices and clear metrics of accomplishment. And if you just follow these guidelines on how to run a church, you will make disciples. And that's kind of what I'm chafing on in this book, is saying, no, there's a lot more mystery here, and we need to be open to that. And rather than just judging ourselves and others on effectiveness, maybe we need to look at deeper matters of the soul.
Okay. So you got lots of topics in here.
Yeah.
Ambition, effectiveness, wastefulness, vampires.
These are chapter titles.
Shepherds, dramas, Enemies, simplicity, complexity, redundancy, brevity, illumination. There's like 24 chapters. And they all how did you come up with those one-word titles?
It's hard work.
It must be hard work. Comfort, rest, platform. The danger of basing our ministry on popularity rather than presence and proximity.
That's a subtitle.
Yeah. That's each one has a subtitle. I should probably read all the subtitles.
You don't have to, no.
For the next 10 minutes, because that I think would really sell the book. What is the danger of basing our ministry on popularity rather than presence and proximity? And how do you define presence and proximity?
You got to read the chapter, don't you?
I didn't read that one. That's not the ones that I've read. So you start out with ambition. Why did you start with ambition? Because it starts with an A?
Yeah, A, ambition. Everything goes alphabetically. No,
number 3 is wastefulness.
The chapters are kind of grouped thematically. If you read them, it makes some sense. So, some about ambition because it starts with a story when I was in seminary, and I was in a preaching class. There were only like 10 students in this class, and on the first day of class, the professor asked us why we were there, what program we were in, and the first guy shared and said that he was there in seminary because he was going to be the next Bill Hybels. And this is, 15 years ago.
That's what Jesus said too,
right?
Didn't he? Wasn't he going to be the next Bill Hybels?
Bill Hybels isn't dead. We don't need another one yet.
Yeah.
And then the next guy said something weird about how his father was a pastor, his grandfather was a pastor, how he's going to be a pastor too. It's like everyone had these really weird reasons.
Did they disturb you at the time?
They did. They did. And then it occurred to me that I was the only normal one in the room.
Oh, that's good.
Right?
Congratulations.
Well, of course, yeah. But so it just, I went, oh no, what's my issue? Everyone here is completely crazy. I must be also. And it started to get this reflective thing going about what really draws people into ministry. Why are we here? And recognizing there's good ambition and there's bad ambition. There's godly ambition and then there's ego ambition. And I think what fuels a lot of people into ministry is that desire to count, to matter, to make a difference. But it's not often fueled from a pure place. It's fueled from a very insecure place. And then you get all the fallout from that.
Which then leads, like chapter 2 is on effectiveness. And have we made an idol of being effective? But we're supposed to be effective, right? I mean, if you have 2 paths you could take and one would be effective and one would be ineffective, why would you take the ineffective path?
The problem is when your primary goal is effectiveness, that leads to control.
Yeah.
And controlling outcomes is not what I think we're called to. So the story, the backbone of that chapter is the story of Moses in Numbers chapter 20, where he performs a miracle and water flows from the rock and everyone's very happy and the people are in the wilderness. And
he was effective.
He was very effective.
He brought water from the rock.
Exactly.
End of story.
No. God turns around and judges Moses because he actually disobeyed God's command, and because of his disobedience, he's prevented from entering the promised land.
Yeah.
So on one hand, from a human perspective, you have effective ministry, but from God's point of view, he was a failure.
So God missed the point of how effective Moses was.
No, I think what happened is that God decided to act in spite of Moses, not because of him. And what we get in trouble in ministry is when we look at the outcomes of our ministry and we believe that it's because of our control that happened.
Right.
Or if we see ineffectual ministry or so-called unfruitful ministry, we assume it's a deficit in our work, rather than recognizing there are greater mysteries at work here. And sometimes success is not because of me, it's in spite of me. And sometimes unfruitfulness isn't because I've been unfaithful, but because God is up to something else.
I think what you actually said in this chapter was God works always in spite of us.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a strong statement.
It is.
Explain.
Well, man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. So everything we do is ultimately, its root is found in God's grace.
Okay.
So it isn't my ability that causes it to happen.
But what if we're really, really good at what we're doing?
Well, to use Paul's language, that would be trusting in our flesh.
Yeah, what if we got great flesh?
A lot of us do have very good flesh.
Great flesh.
I mean, just look at a turtle's butt.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
That's good vascular
suck
flesh.
Oxygen right out of a frozen pond. That's fantastic. Okay. We
can't get away from it, can we?
So ambition, effectiveness, wastefulness, which is about worship.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that sometimes worship is extravagant or should be extravagant.
Yeah.
Is it a call to pursue extravagance?
Well, no, the main point there is genuine worship is never transactional.
Okay.
A lot of people I think, approach worship, again, because of our consumer economy and the way we've been shaped to think about life, we see worship as, I'm giving something to God. Mm-hmm. And he gives me something. And then he gives me something back.
Yeah.
And when you study worship in Scripture, the purest worship, and you see this in David, for example, it is a joyful giving of ourselves to God, not necessarily expecting anything in return other than God himself.
Yeah.
And you see that in, I think it's Mark 14, where the woman pours out the oil on Jesus' feet and the disciples freak out.
Right. Pouring the oil on Jesus' feet.
Yeah, the disciples see it.
Say, hey, that could have been used for poor. That was wasteful.
Right.
They have a point.
They do. They're thinking transactionally. The oil should have been used to do something practical.
Yeah.
And what she did with it was poured out on Jesus as an act of devotion and love and worship.
Yeah.
And they don't see it that way.
Right.
He turns around and says, don't rebuke her. She's done something beautiful to me. And that's what true worship is. It isn't practical. It's not looking for a return on investment. Okay. It is just an overflow of one's joy and gratitude to God. And we see this even in human relationships. Like when you buy your wife a nice gift.
Yeah.
I mean, or bring her flowers is a good example. Like there's nothing practical about flowers. And yet, I don't know, my wife has never said, you really should have spent that $15 on something more practical.
Yeah.
Because the giving of something like flowers is an act of wastefulness, but joy and love.
I hear you.
So anyway,
you talk about the arts as an example of something that a lot of churches feel is, well, you can't justify just doing the arts for the sake of art. It needs to be to have an evangelistic message. It needs to be a carrier of something effective.
Right. The problem with it ultimately is when we view art that way, when we view worship that way, we head down the road of viewing people that way.
Yeah.
Or viewing God that way.
You need to be a carrier of something effective.
Right. Your value comes from your usefulness. It's a utilitarian ethic that is actually foreign to Scripture, and it's foreign to the Christian faith. We believe that every single person is inherently valuable, even when they're not useful.
Yeah.
And we believe that God is inherently valuable, even when he doesn't do what I want him to. So if you have a utilitarian ethic, which I think a lot of American evangelicalism does, both in our worship, in our ministries, it becomes really hard for us then to value the things that God actually values for themselves. And the arts is one way of reinvigorating that vision of allowing music and visual arts and other forms of art to just be beautiful and enjoy them as a way of training us to value things apart from their usefulness.
So my church wants to build a really gorgeous building. Mm-hmm. Some people say, that's a little wasteful. Mm-hmm. There's poor people. Skye says, no, build that gorgeous building. That's extravagant worship.
I'm not giving people, detailed applications. I want them to wrestle with these concepts in their own contexts. Okay. But I do think a church and its leadership should be asking, where are we instilling the inherent value of beauty? In our discipleship, rather than just reinforcing utilitarianism all the time.
Right. So I went to a church that had a bunch of artsy people in it, and they would do things like on a Pentecost Sunday, they formed like paper mache tongues of fire and hung them all over the auditorium, all over the sanctuary, over people's heads on fishing line, and there were probably 100 of them, and it was beautiful. It took a heck of a lot of time, and you think, okay, this is like for one Sunday, you just spent, 40 hours, 50 hours making all of these really cool things and painting them and then hanging them all over the sanctuary. Is that wasteful? Is it?
Well, it also, you can't talk about the arts without also talking about a theology of vocation. In that God has called some people to be artists and to use their time and energy to create beautiful things as a reflection of his beauty. And again, the ultimate, I don't know if I made this statement in the book, but I've certainly taught this in other places. I see beauty as the foundation of social justice, meaning the way we treat people, including those who are different from us, those who are not valued by society, that justice component is rooted in a belief that some things are inherently valuable apart from their usefulness. So when I go to, very efficiently run, meticulously driven, corporate-minded churches, usually what I find is children are not in the worship services because they're a distraction. There's even been cases of mentally handicapped adults being escorted out of worship services because they're distracting. And what that's communicating is these people are not helping us achieve our corporate mission, therefore they can be pushed aside.
Shuttled off.
And that is so profoundly un-Christ-like.
Yeah.
He was the one who was bringing people from the periphery, from the margins of society, and saying, you will be called great in the kingdom of God, and woe to those who are preventing you from entering the kingdom.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's what I mean by we need to learn to value things inherently rather than just their usefulness, which is exactly what the disciples were failing to do in Mark 14.
Okay. So we get to the next chapter after you've done like ambition, effectiveness, and wastefulness, and the next chapter is entitled Vampires.
Yeah. I like that one.
You say, to a growing number of people, the church feels like a vampire sucking the life out of them. That's kind of strong language. You want to define, unpack that?
This is
a big thing.
This is
theme.
This is a little autobiographical too.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of the book is autobiographical, but anybody who's listened to this podcast for a while or read my other stuff knows that I have had my struggles with institutional Christianity.
Yeah.
From all sides, as a pastor, as a layperson, just as a Christian. And so by vampire church, I mean institutional churches that primarily view people as a resource that wants to suck their time, their energy, their money into advancing the institutional goals of that church. Rather than, I think, the Ephesians 4 model, which says that Jesus gave church leaders, apostles, prophets, evangelists, teachers, and shepherds, gave these leaders to the church, meaning the people of Christ, in order to equip them to fulfill what God is calling them to do in the world. So it's a reverse understanding of, first of all, it defines church as an institution, and then it sees the church people as there to support the institution.
Right.
Whereas I think Ephesians 4 says just the opposite, that the leadership exists to equip and support the people to accomplish what God is calling them to do in the world.
So Jesus' goal in coming was to
redeem all things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think you phrased it in the chapter as bring everything under his reign, or
this gets
reign
into
overall.
This is a deeper exegetical exploration of Ephesians 4, but yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and you think that looks different than getting everyone involved in their local church?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with being involved in your local church, but Jesus, as I heard someone say many years ago, God did not create the universe and then retire into full-time church work.
Yeah.
He's not interested in being Lord of the church. He's interested in being Lord over all things.
Yeah.
And the way that happens is as we come to reign in our lives over all that we have responsibility for under Christ's authority and reign, then he reigns over those things. So he doesn't just want our involvement in the institutional church. He wants to reign over our homes and our businesses and our communities and our schools and our sports and our arts and all of it. And yet so many churches are equipping people just to be good church members.
Right.
Rather than equipping them to actually live their life with Christ in all areas. And that's what I mean by vampire church. It just wants to suck you into its orbit, its institutional orbit, and advance the institutional goals of that 501c3 organization.
Here's a chunk. This is Skye talking, but he'll sound a lot like me. From this chapter on vampires. A vampire church assumes that Jesus' goal is to simply reign over the church while all other aspects of his creation are relegated to irrelevance. Rather than empowering people to manifest God's reign in the world, vampire churches seek to use people to advance the goals of the institutional church. Success is reached when a person is plugged into the apparatus of the church institution rather than released to serve God's people and their neighbors out in the world through their vocations and in communion with Christ. This drive to use people rather than empower them is what drains the life out of them. So what does it look like to empower people in a church context?
Well, it means leaders, number one, it's very relational. So leaders actually need to know the people. It can't be institutionalized. It can't be a factory system of making disciples. It needs to be life on life. Two, it means celebrating what people are doing outside the institution with Christ in the world, not just celebrating what they do within the institution. And it means having a broader vision of what God's mission actually is. What do we measure and celebrate in our churches? That's a big big piece, right? A lot of churches will measure volunteer involvement in the church or how much giving is coming into the institution, those kinds of institutional markers. And yet occasionally I meet a church or a church leader that measures other things. Like a friend of mine in Colorado has a church where they not only measure how much money people give to the church every year, but how much money do their members give to other ministries and institutions outside of the local church. And they actually publicize that.
And is that considered bad?
No, it's celebrated.
So the money you give here, that's the plus. The money you don't give here, that's the minus.
Because they want to celebrate the actual giving capacity and sacrifice of the people in the church, not just the institution.
But it doesn't do them any good.
It does do them good because it advances the work of Christ. Or you might celebrate, Andy Crouch tells this great story in one of his books about a woman who was a lawyer for the EPA that cleaned up Boston Harbor back in the day. And her pastor acknowledging that the only time she was ever recognized in the church was for teaching second grade Sunday school. And that's great. I'm glad people teach second grade Sunday school, but the church never recognized or honored this woman whose faith motivated her to help clean up Boston Harbor, which benefited the whole community.
Right.
So those kinds of things where we have these blinders that say, well, ministry is this very narrow thing which happens under the 501c3 organization of the church, and everything else that God's people are doing is irrelevant to me as a pastor or as a church leader.
Yeah. Okay. So how do you, if you're a church leader and you need volunteers, for example, the children's ministry, how do you get people to donate their time and effort to support the children's ministry and not turn into a vampire?
Well,
sucking them dry.
Two things. Number one, you're not going to get people by telling them that serving in the nursery matters more than what they're doing out in the world.
But what if that's an effective motivator?
Because that's creating
guilt.
It is effective in a limited way.
Guilt works, Skye.
Because it creates a secular sacred divide.
Yeah.
And says certain things matter because they happen in the church and everything outside doesn't. And that is antithetical. It's actually Gnostic. It's a heretical view that is foreign to the New Testament. I think the way you do it, and I've talked to friends in ministry who I think are really good at this, is when people feel like their church leaders love them, care for them, and honor their calling, when that church leader then steps up and says, hey, you know what? I need help with the nursery in the church, that church member is more likely to step up and say, yeah, I want to help because I recognize, number one, these kids matter to God and I want to help my community that way. But I also want to do it because my church leaders have built so much into me and helping me do what God's calling me to do in the world. I want to help the church leaders also do what they're called to do. So it's a mutually respectful sense of calling and support rather than the church leader saying, I need to use you to help me accomplish my mission.
Right. And how does a pastor, how can you inadvertently send the message that you don't value the other things they do? And then how can you consciously send the message that you do?
I mean, there's a lot there. What do you celebrate in the church? What do you celebrate on Sunday morning? What do you pray for? What are your illustrations in your sermons? Where do you give your time? Do you ever go outside the church building and actually meet with your members where they work? Do you know what they're doing all week long? Or do you just expect them to come into the church building and have meetings with you where you work all the time? I mean, this is not rocket science. This is just old-fashioned shepherding of souls. For most of church history, a pastor would spend most of their week outside the church building. They were in the fields and factories and homes and hospitals and jails with the people.
That's insane.
And then on Sunday, they would lead worship.
Okay. And when did that change?
Well, it depends where you're talking, but I think in the probably mid-20th century, that changed dramatically, and the model became, Pastor, you stay in the church all week long and run programs, and anybody who wants to be ministered to needs to come to you and be professionally ministered to in the programs of the church. And it's not entirely bad, but what it's done indirectly is alienated pastors from knowing their sheep and knowing the pastures where their sheep spend all week long. So we've dehumanized ministry, we've industrialized it, we've tried to make it efficient. And I think the evidence shows that it hasn't worked. It's made big churches, but it doesn't mean it's made faithful disciples.
And the whole book starts out talking about some of the studies showing how many young people are just checking out from the church. And it's not necessarily because they're checking out from their faith.
Right.
They still consider themselves believers. They still they want to be part of Christian community in some sense.
Right.
They don't want to be part of the traditional local.
Another way of putting it, I agree, but another way of putting it is they're not interested in just being used by some pastor or some church leader team to advance the church's agenda.
Yeah.
They're interested in knowing God deeply, communing with Christ, and being equipped to serve him in their lives. And that's exactly what we're called to in the New Testament as church leaders, but most of our systems are not designed to do that.
Yeah.
They're designed to use people to advance the institution.
So if you're a pastor and you're brainstorming new programs you can start that you can give people, a chance to plug into and go do your ideas, are you barking up the wrong tree?
Probably, especially if you're not willing to shut down a bunch of things that have already been running. I mean, could you imagine if we tried to industrialize marriage and say, hey, just follow this preset structure for every week of your marriage and you will have a great I mean, it doesn't work that way. People are complicated. You need life on life, relational, love, grace, forgiveness, all those intangible things that are hard to measure.
Yeah.
Ministry is the same way. It happens relationally. The problem is we don't like that because it's inefficient. And we try to industrialize it to mass produce it.
Right.
And then we're shocked when people aren't being formed into really healthy disciples. Or we're shocked when leaders themselves flame out in horrible ways.
So have you spent any time thinking about if you, Skye Jitani, were starting a church right now, what would it look like?
Oh, yeah. I've spent plenty of time thinking about
that. Anything you'd like to share?
I've written some about this, not in this book.
Does it meet in a school? Does it meet in a bar? Does it meet in your basement?
One thing you will not get in this book is a plan for what church should look like in detail. I mean,
how can we be effective?
Because ultimately, the way to do it is by gathering with other people who are committed to one another and then prayerfully discerning through the leading of the Holy Spirit, what does God want to do here?
Yeah.
And in this place at this time.
Yeah.
And in some cases, that could be a church building. In some cases, it could be meeting in a school. In some cases, it's meeting in homes. And so it can look like a million different things depending on context. I have friends in ministry around the country that are in very impoverished areas, and they realize the only functional institution in this community is the church. Therefore, we need a school, and it needs a health clinic, and it needs, I get that. Where we live in Wheaton, we have a lot of very functional institutions. Right. I'm not sure the church needs to be doing all the things that it does in another community.
Do you think parachurch organizations are part of a solution, or do they help to take some of these things and just say, oh, we're just going to focus on this? We just do well.
They have a place. Yeah, they have a place. I ultimately, though, I think we need to recognize that everything we call, quote unquote, the church is not the church.
Yeah.
And so when I think about if I were starting a church today, if I were doing it in my context where we live, I don't think it would probably have a building. And I doubt it would be program driven. It'd probably be more relational.
Do you think it could grow to be mega?
Not in the traditional sense, no.
Okay. You have to redefine mega?
Well, yeah, I think the church is mega. I mean, it's literally billions of people.
Well,
but
the church with a capital C. Yeah, but aren't you more worried about your church?
No, I'm really not.
Skye's church?
If that language is ever used, we have bigger problems.
Okay. How do people get your book? Where do they find it?
They can get it on my website, skyjitani.com. It's on sale right now.
Skyjitani.com.
I believe maybe this week only. It's also it's published by Moody Press.
Yeah.
And I think they're having a sale on their website of all their books, including mine.
Okay. moodypress.org?
I don't know for sure. You can Google it. You figure it out. And then, of course, it's on Amazon, and it's an ebook format. I think there's even an audio version.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you read it?
No.
Oh.
I got to put that in my contracts going forward.
Yeah, definitely. No, I'll be reading my books. Thank you.
Yes. And it has also been released in South Korea. So if you are in South Korea or you prefer a Korean language version, you can also get the book.
Wow. Does that mean they also read it in North Korea?
I think they do speak the same language.
That's fantastic.
But I'm not sure it's available there.
Go to the DMZ and toss a few across. See how it goes.
I'm sure that's what they need most.
Toss a few across. Yeah.
How about some meat without parasites?
Do you have vampire churches? North Korea. All right. I got a new hobby. I find it pleasurable. Sitting around reading Skye's new book, Immeasurable. Because if you're a pastor and you want an empire, you might need to worry if you're really building a vampire. You know, all this stuff, it causes such pain that sometimes the church can make us go kind of insane. But really, it's all about Jesus and his reign that he's bringing to your house and your work and everywhere that you don't act like a jerk. So let's go have some chicken that's flavored jerk. And go buy Skye's book. Immeasurable.
I'm so glad we got through that song without a turtle reference.
I forgot about the turtles. Can I do it again?
No.
Can I do it again?
I know what you're getting for Christmas, though.
Can I do it again? I like turtles. We catch turtles every summer.
Do you like turtle butts or mix-a-lot?
No. They are very soft, though, the little squishy areas that protrude from the shell in various places. Boy, you really have some enthusiastic offspring. All right, thanks for coming, and we will see you next week.
See you guys.
Bye.
The Phil Vischer Podcast is produced by Phil Vischer Enterprises and recorded live at Jellyfish Lab Studios. This episode was edited by Jason Rugg and was fact-checked by absolutely no one. For more information, go to philvischer.com.